Mr. President, want to express my appreciation to the fellow senators who have come up innumerable times to express their regrets for what has happened to Florida, as we did with our colleagues from Texas with regard to the hurricane in Texas. And indeed, it was an unusual storm. The very almost gold standard storm of Hurricane Andrew 25 years ago, it crossed the state of Florida in 4 hours, and it was small in diameter compared to this present hurricane that hit Florida and traveled right up the peninsula and therefore covered up the entire state. And so for the past few weeks, traveling all around, there was vast devastation, either by the wind or by flooding. It's really hard to believe that a state as large as ours could be virtually covered up by a storm. There was limited access to critical supplies like gasoline, and some places sustained considerable damage. I remember down in the Keys at the part that hit the northeastern quadrant of the eye wall, Big Pine Key. I went to a trailer park, a place of mobile homes, and there was not one mobile home that was sitting upright. They were all turned on their side or turned over on their roof. It was something that you just can't believe, the force of the wind. Now, the cost of rebuilding is going to be in the billions. We've done a temporary measure of $15 billion. That's running out. We're going to have to do something in the immediate for the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico. But there is going to be a continuing cost in Texas and a huge cost in Florida. Many people have been dislocated and they're unable to move back into their homes. You take people in the Florida Keys. There is a tourism economy there, and to have a tourism economy, you've got to get the service personnel back in. Well, they don't have any homes. And so you've got to bring in temporary housing. And in the Keys, there's one way in and one way out. And so that's going to take some time. And then sadly, in the tragedy of all tragedies, 11 frail, elderly seniors died in a hot box that was a nursing home that had lost power, and the generators that were required under existing law, existing regulations of the state of Florida, the generators were for putting back on the lights. There weren't the generators sufficient in order to run the air conditioning systems. And 11 senior citizens perished. And that was after a number of calls that had been made to the governor's cell phone and calls that were made to Florida Power and Light. And there is a criminal investigation that is underway that will answer some of the questions of why, as they pled for help to come and to get back on the power, why were those never answered? And as a result, 11 people have died. Something like that just simply shouldn't happen in America. A country that has the resources and the compassion that our people have. Well, I want to say that if people can't get through in an emergency like this to a federal or state agency, I want them to call me at my office, 407 area code 872 7161, or the Watts line 888-671-4091, or visit the website at billnelson.senate.gov. We'll get to the bottom of it. Because in an emergency situation like that, with people's lives on the line, that should never happen again. And I'm so proud of the people that when in our office so diligently, and we had many of the employees here in the Washington office go to Florida as eyes and ears out there in the community before FEMA could get in to register people for individual assistance, because they couldn't get through if they had cell phones and the cell phone service was spotty. They couldn't get through. We had people out there in the field signing people up and getting it to FEMA for the individual assistance. And our folks in the Florida staff, as well as the Washington staff that went down there, they did a wonderful job. And they worked their fingers to the bone, and they worked their hearts out. And I want them to know how much I appreciate that, serving the people of Florida in need. And it's important that those of us in public service respond with urgency and purpose when somebody calls for help. And that applies to all of us in public service. I was really heartened what I saw all over Florida. I saw people helping people. I saw frail elderly that had no place to go were taken in a girls' dormitory that had air conditioning. And they took care of them for 4 nights, 8 frail elderly women. I saw people helping people in Belle Glade. Senator Rubio and I went to Belle Glade together and served food. We went and thanked those students in that dorm near Immokalee. We thanked them together for people helping people. Now, what we need to do is to take that same effort that we saw in Texas and that we've seen in Florida of people helping people, and we have got to help the people of the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico. Over the weekend, the full-scale devastation now of the 3rd hurricane, the first, Texas, the second, Florida, and on up into the southeast, and now the 3rd one, not only hitting the Virgin Islands like the former one did, but just ripping up Puerto Rico. I've talked to the governor, and he says the island faces a humanitarian crisis. And the devastation over this past week has become a lot clearer to us as we start to see all of the devastation on our TV screens. According to one report, and I quote, Hurricane Maria whipped Puerto Rico with Irma-level winds, drenching the island with Harvey-level flooding, crippled communications, decimated buildings, and damaged a dam that puts the downstream residents at risk of a catastrophe. End of quote. That's what our fellow Americans are facing right now down in the Caribbean. We need to act with urgency and purpose to aid Puerto Rico in their time of need. I will have a chance to go down there on Sunday. I want to see it firsthand, and I will continue to carry this message that the United States Congress has got to come to the aid of our friends in the Virgin Islands, our fellow citizens in the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico. So I have talked to the Department of Defense and said, do everything that you can do to assist, and they are trying. And I've talked to the FAA administrator. Just the simple thing of being able to have instrument landings after so many of the radars got knocked out. And here's one example of just a practical problem facing the island, as if they didn't have enough practical problems to begin with. Look at the financial crisis. Look at the Medicaid funds we're going to run out. That's before the hurricane. Look at the Zika crisis in Puerto Rico. And that's before the hurricane. Think what it's like now. So here's an example. So one of the radars on the top of a mountain gets taken out by the storm. All right, we need to get it back up there. We need a helicopter, and can get a helicopter to take a radar up to place it there because the roads are impassable. But now there's a cloud cover up in the mountain. They can't fly up. And so one problem compounds another, so we can get instrument landings coming into Puerto Rico instead of the visual flight rules where you have to keep so much more distance from the planes. And just think, if we end up having to have an airlift in order to get food and supplies into Puerto Rico to keep them alive. So now's not the time to talk about their former financial problems about the debt payments to bondholders. In a crisis, all that matters is saving the lives and giving people the resources they need to get back on their feet. I'm hopeful that our colleagues will see the urgency of the situation in Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands, in addition to the ongoing troubles in Florida that will continue for some time, and I expect Texas as well. And I hope that we can work together to get an aid package soon that helps all of those affected by the storms as soon as possible. Because why? We are all Americans. We need to act like it. We need to come together and get on the long road to recovery. Mr. President, I yield the floor.